How you doing there? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Pei Aleph, Daf 81 of Masechta BavaMetzia. Friends, yo friends. I guess we're gonna go weiter on like stuff in the Mishnah. We're gonna talk about the default status of like shomers and stuff like after it's done. Okay, let's just jump in. We're gonna start on Daf Pei Amud Beis. 2 lines before it gets wide. Basically 4 lines from the bottom, 5 lines from the bottom. 6 lines from the bottom. Givaldig. So this is talking about. So we had said that that an umin is a shomer sacher. So meaning if you have a worker who's, let's say, weaving a garment, okay? So he would be considered a shomer sacher. He's getting paid for his work. He would be considered a shomer sacher. Now, so now we said, what did the Mishnah say? One in shomer sacher, v'chulin shomer tol shelcha v'havimos shomer chinums. Now, if when the work is done, the worker says to the employer, to the client, okay, I'm done. Why don't you come now and pick it up? Pay me when you pay me. Hopefully soon, but don't worry if you don't pay me when you pick it up. You can pay me later, but come and pick it up. I want you to come pick it up. So in that case, he's be'etzem shomer chinam, because he's not connecting the he's not connecting his holding on to the garment to his receiving of money, right? His, I guess, custodianship, his watching of the garment to the receiving of money, right? If you would say, come pick it up and pay me, well then be'etzim he's receiving money for, keeping the garment safe. But over here he's saying, look, come and collect it, unconnected to the money piece, and, pay me when you can. So in that case, he's a shomer chinam. He's not expecting any payment. He's basically disconnected the watching of the garment from the receiving of payment. So is it v'chulin she'amru? So if these umanin say, "Tol shelcha, come pick up your thing, v'havimos," and then later on you could pay me shomer chinam. Well, then he's a shomer chinam for the garment. So now we get into a very, very interesting discussion. In my opinion, it's an interesting discussion. It has to deal with a shoyl, with a borrower, and here it goes. Tanan Awesome, we learn, I think later on in Masechta BavaMetzia, and Daf Tzadi Ches, another 18 days, something to look forward to. Tanan Awesome, we learn in a Mishnah, Amilo Shoyel Shlach V'Shilcha V'Meisa Chayv V'chein B'Shah She'Machzira. Wow. Amraf Ba'Papa Mevchiz L'Oshanu Ela She'Echzir B'Sochi Meshelasa V'Alachi Meshelasa Potter. Wow, it's gewaldig. Okay, so be'etzem you have a borrower and a borrower. The borrower is the lender. I'm kidding. I'm not going to do that. You have a borrower and a lender. So the borrower is let's call him Reuven and Shimon. Okay, Reuven is borrowing an ox from Shimon. Okay, Shimon's the lender, Reuven's the borrower. So if Reuven says to Shimon, hey, let's say he's renting it from Sunday at noon until the following Sunday at noon. Okay, 1 week. So now, if Reuven, the borrower, says to Shimon, the lender, would you send me your cow? Send it with your eved, send it with the shaliach, send me your cow. Okay, and then Shimon sends him the cow. If the cow dies on the way, Reuven is already chayiv. Of course, the shoel is chayiv for onsin. So, if Reuven says to Shimon, hey Shimon, can you send it over? And then, send it with a shaliach, send it with an eved. So then, if anything happens to the cow on the way, Reuven is chayiv b'onsin. But if, Reuven had said to Shimon, hey, I'm interested in borrowing your cow, and then Shimon on his own accord goes and sends it with his eved or with a shaliach, well then in that case Shimon would be the one who would be chayiv. Right? If anything happens to his cow, Reuven would not be responsible. And the same thing goes on the way back, right? Returning it. If Shimon says, hey Reuven, can you send me back my cow? So then Shimon would be responsible. But if Reuven on his own sends back the cow to Shimon, so then Reuven would be responsible. Right? If Reuven on his own sends back the cow to Shimon, Reuven would be responsible. Now, here is the thing. The important thing for us, okay, so I kind of said all the scenarios. Here's the important thing for us. The important thing for us is that we're saying that at the end, so we're going to explain it a little bit, but basically, how about this? When Reuven returns the cow, and he sends the cow back to Shimon, Reuven is going to be chayiv for onsin still, i.e., he's still considered a shoel. He's still considered a borrower. And okay. And it's going to be an interesting tie into our Mishnah, and we're gonna flesh it out. Okay, let's read it inside. It's not awesome. We learned over there the Mishnah. Amr lo shoel shlach v'shulcha v'meisa chayiv. So if Reuven says to Shimon, hey Shimon, can you send the cow to me with your Eved, with a Shaliach? And Shimon obliged. Shimon did. He sent it with his Eved, with his Shaliach. V'meisa, it died on the way. Chayiv, Reuven is going to be chayiv because he requested that it be sent. And he's already, so therefore his borrowing already begins at that point, and he's going to be chayiv already for onsin if it dies on the way. V'chein b'shasha machzira. Well, and then let's add that, but if Shimon on his own accord sent the cow to Reuven, then Shimon would be responsible. V'chein b'shasha machzira. And the same thing when it's being returned. If Reuven goes and sends the cow back to Shimon on his own, then Reuven is still going to be chayav for any onsin, his borrowing still continues. So now, Amr Rafram by Pope. So now it says, Rafram by Pope, Amr of Chizde. Lo shanu ela she'echzira b'sochi me she'losa. This, what we just said, applies only if Reuven returns it still during the terms of the borrowing, which is, right? So I said that, Reuven is borrowing it from Sunday at noon till Sunday at noon. So if Reuven on the Sunday that the deal ends, right? So on Sunday morning, how about this? Sunday and Sunday is probably more confusing than, let's say, Sunday to Thursday, the work week in Eretz Yisrael. He's borrowing it from Sunday at noon till Thursday at noon. Wow, yeah, that's probably going to be easier than Sunday and Sunday. So he's borrowing it for 5 days he needs it for the work week, right? Friday already, he's getting ready for Shabbos. He needs the cow for a week of work. So he borrows it on Sunday, right from Sunday at noon till Thursday at noon. Says Rafin Bar Papa in the name of Rav Chizda that when we say that when Reuven sends it back to Shimon, Reuven is going to be responsible for any onsin, just like during the period of borrowing, that so long as Reuven is returning it to Shimon, still during the period of the borrowing period. So say Thursday morning, 9 a.m., Reuven sends the cow back to Shimon. Now the terms of the borrowing is that it's still, Reuven's still borrowing it till noon. Thursday morning at 9 a.m., Reuven sends the cow back to Shimon. The cow drops dead. So because it's still within the terms of the borrowing, so Reuven, we're saying, is responsible. Avol le'achar yemei she'lasa poter. But comes Thursday at noon, when the borrowing is over, if at that point Reuven sends the cow back to Shimon, well, he's no longer borrowing it. He's no longer responsible as a borrower at that point. And if at that point it drops dead and it's ones, well then Reuven is going to be potter. So what's the important thing? The important thing is that we're seeing that once sort of the commitment, I guess maybe you could say, once the period of the agreement is over, he's no longer considered a shoel. So now Mosiv Rav Nachman Bar Papa asked a kasha from our Mishnah, because v'chulan she'amru kol es shelcha v'avimos shomer chinam, that our Mishnah says that the worker finishes his work, and it's only once he says to the client, I want you to come and pick it up, you can pay me later, only at that point does he become a shomer chinam. But Hagemartiv, if he simply says, I'm done with my work, he's still Shomer Sachar. He's still going to be considered a Shomer Sachar. So meaning, even though his work is complete, his status remains the same. So on the one hand, by the shoyel, we're saying when his borrowing is complete, he's no longer a shoel, or so we want to say, and that he'd be pater for onsin at that point. Yet, when it comes to a worker, we're saying that when the work is complete, he remains as the same status as a shomer Sachar until he says, look, come and pick it up and you can pay me later. At that point, he becomes a shomer chinam. But by default, he remains a shomer Sachar. So by shoel, it sounds like we're saying that by default, he's no longer a shoel, yet by the worker, we're saying that by default, he remains a shomer Sachar. Lo nisht. We've got the diuk wrong. The implication is wrong. We wanted to say that from the fact that the Mishnah says that when the worker says, come and pick up the garment, you can pay me later, only at that point does he become a shomer chinam. But by default, he would remain a shomer sachar. No, that is not the right diuk. Lo ha have ma'os vitol es shelcha. No, the implication is that when he says, come and pick it up and you can pay me later, beseder, he's a shomer chinam. But if he says, come and pay me, and then you can take back your garment, well then he's a, if he says, come and pick up your thing and then pay me later, he's a shomer chinam. But if he says, come and pay me and then you'll be able to pick up your garment, then he's a shomer sachar. That's the implication. But what about when he's simply completed his work? He's a shomer chinam too. Right? So when our Mishnah says that when he says that when Ruvain, should we say Ruvain and Shimon? We should. Ruvain is the worker, Shimon is the client, okay? That when Ruvain says to Shimon, I'm done, come and pick it up, you can pay me later, at that point he's a shomer chinam. You know what the implication is? But if he says, pay me and then I'll give it back to you, then he's a shomer sachar. What if he's simply done with his work? He's also a shomer chinam. Only when he deliberately connects the returning of the garment to the receiving of payment, at that point does he become a shomer sachar. But when he's done with the work, he becomes a shomer chinam, just like a shoel. When he's done borrowing, he's no longer a shoel. Right, so again, the top line of Pei Aleph Mid Aleph, if he says, pay me and then I'll give you back your garment, well then he's a shomer sachar. Aval gemartiv, my shomer chinam. Okay, so what? So then we're saying then that by default, gemartiv, that when he's done, he's no longer a shomer sachar. He by default, memela becomes a shomer chinam. If that's the case, adetoni v'chulan she'amru toles shelcha v'have ma'os shomer chinam. But if that's the case, then why be so confusing? You confused us. The Mishnah says that if he says that only if he said, well, the implication is, it sounds like what it's saying is that only if he says, come and pick up your garment and then you can pay me later, is he a shomer chinam. The obvious implication, and we fell into the same trap, would be that by default he would remain a shomer sachar. And if you're going to tell me that by default he becomes a shomer chinam, so just say that once he's done he's a shomer chinam. And memela, I know. And of course, if he specifically disconnects the payment from, explicitly disconnects the payment from holding on to it and being responsible for it, certainly then you would be a shomer chinam, obviously. But even by default, he's a shomer chinam. Say that. Why be confusing? That if Ruvain, the Uman says, take back your thing and then you can bring me money later, shomer chinam, at that point he's a shomer chinam. Nishma inon, why don't you tell us instead, Gimartiv, that when he says that I'm done, he becomes a shomer chinam v'chol, and then obviously, toles shelcha. Then certainly when he says, take back your thing, you can pay me later, he's a shomer chinam. Toles shelcha, it's drichale, no. I needed the Mishnah to tell me, toles shelcha v'avimos, because salkadaita, I may have thought to say, you know what? Shomer chinam nami le'ave. I might think to say that if he explicitly disconnects holding on to the holding on to the garment to the receiving of payment, when he says, come, just take your garment, you can pay me later, he's explicit about that disconnect. He's just saying, I don't want this, I don't want any responsibility, I don't want nothing, just come and take it from me. Then I might think he's not even a shomer chinam, he's a gunish, he's a nothing. He's got no connection anymore. Kamash Malan, then no. Even if he says, come and pick up your thing, you can pay me later, he's still a shomer chinam. Gewaldig. Those who say, okay, we're going to have like three different versions now, kind of like the same. Yeah, we just like, use a lot of koiches to kind of get through that. I don't know what even is that anymore. What was that? Like the default status of the shomer sacher and stuff. Now we're going to see like three of the same kind of things, if you could say. Wow. Yeah. Okay. I hope my brain's all right. I'm not. What do I call it when my brain is mush? It's funny. I feel like in some ways my brain is mush, but it isn't. It's not that kind of a mush, which is really nice. We haven't had mushy dafs in a while. Oh my gosh, we had a long run where like every day was mush. We haven't really had those in a while, which is really nice. Those who say Omer of Nachman by Pape says of Nachman by Pape av ona nami tanino. That meaning we said by the shoyol that when the borrowing is over, is no longer shoyol. So it says of Nachman by Pape that af ona nami tanino, and our Mishnah Taka supports that. And that our Mishnah Taka supports that. That the Mishnah says that if Ruvain the Uman says, take back your thing and then pay me later, he's a shomer chinam. My love, adin gemartiv. And let's say that the same would apply when he's simply done. He would also by default be a shomer chinam. He's no longer shomer sacher once he's done with the work. Just like a shoyel is no longer a shoyel once he's done with the she'ela. Lo tolashelcha shiny. No, you could say it's not necessarily proof, because I'll argue that no, Davka, when he says take it and then pay me later, he's shomer chinam. But I could argue that simply finishing it maybe would still be shomer sacher, and you can't necessarily definitively bring that proof from our Mishnah. Hu namar by Miramer kame Ravina Rami. Okay, Hu namar by Miramer Rami Masnisin Adadi Mishane asked the two Mishnayos onto each other and answered in front of Ravina. Tnan, we learned in our Mishnah, V'chulan she'amru toles shelcha v'avimo she'mechinam, that if the Uman says, take back your garment and then bring me money later, is a shomer chinam. V'hu adin ligmartiv, and we want to say that the same thing would apply. That that the same thing. Wait, where am I? What? Yeah, what? Okay, what? Wait, what? Yeah, okay. Okay, and the same thing would apply to when he's simply done, he would also be a shomer chinam. Okay, we have a contradiction. If the shoyel says to if Ruvain, the borrower, says to Shimon, shlach v'shilcha v'mesa chayav, that he says, okay, of course. Okay, gewaldig. Okay, yeah, I confused myself. Okay, let me back up a line because I got it now. Sorry. Let's start over this piece again. Huna bar Meramer kame. Where am I? Huna bar Meramer kame to Ravina Ram Masis Adad Mishani. Huna bar Meramer in front of Ravina asked the two following Mishnayos, asked the question of the two following Mishnayos, and he answers. It's just another sort of like implementation, manifestation of like the same machlokas and answer. Tanan, on the one hand, our Mishnah says, V'chulan she'amu tola shel chavavimo shomechinam v'hu adin ligmartiv. On the one hand, we want to say that our Mishnah says that if he says, take your garment and you can pay me later, then he's a shomer chinam. And we want to say that the same thing applies when he simply finishes it, he would be a shomer chinam by default. And yet, v'aminu, we have a contradiction from the shoyel, that if Reuven, the borrower, says to Shimon, the lender, send me your cow, and he sends it, and it dies on the way, Reuven is chayav, Reuven is responsible. But if Shimon on his own accord sent the cow to Reuven, and it died on his own, Reuven is not responsible, and it died, Reuven is not responsible. And we say the same thing applies, and the same thing applies when the borrowing is over, that if Reuven sends the cow back to Shimon, and it dies on the way, Reuven is still going to be chayav. Now, the implication is that even though the borrowing period is over, we're still saying that Reuven is going to be chayiv. So that's the question. On the one hand, we're saying in our Mishnah, we want to say that in our Mishnah, when Reuven the Umin is done working, he's no longer a shomer sachar, he's a shomer chinam, and yet we're saying that by the shoyel, when Reuven the borrower sends back the cow, he's still responsible, even though the borrowing period is over. So we're saying that he remains a shoel even afterwards, yet by the umin, he does not remain a shomer sachar, he becomes a shomer chinam. Umishani, and he answers, Amarafim by Papi, Amarav Chizda, Lo Shanu Elo, Shechzer Besochi Meishelaso, Havalachi Meishelaso Potter. So it says, Rafim by Papi, Amarav Chizda, that when we say that Reuven the borrower is chayiv, it's only when he returns it still when, it's still during the borrowing period. So if we say from noon on Sunday till noon on Thursday, so if he's returning it at 9 a.m. on Thursday, so then that is when he's still going to be responsible, but comes noon on Thursday, so then he is no longer a shoel, just like the worker is no longer a shomer sachar once he's completed his work. Ibailu, they ask a kasha. Potter mishoyel v'chayev keshomer socher o dilma shomer socher nami lo have. So the Gemara asks that when we say that a shoyel, so a shoyel is chayev for almost everything, right? He's chayev even for onsin. He's not chayev if the bail of imo, if the owner is with him. We'll actually get that. We're going to get to that pretty soon. But anyways, a shoyel is even chayev for onsin, and we're saying that after his borrowing period is over, then he's no longer considered a shoyel. So what is he considered? Is he considered a shomer sachar? Maybe not. So when we say that once the borrowing period is over, so he's no longer a shoyel, so we're saying that he's responsible like a shomer sachar? He'd be chayiv for gneva v'aveda? Maybe he's not even a shomer sachar. Maybe he's not even a shomer sachar. Amar Ameimer says, Ameimer mistavra patim shov chayiv shomer sachar, that it makes sense that he would be, okay, he might not be a borrower anymore because the borrowing period is over, but at least he would still be a shomer sachar ho v'nene mehane. Because since, the definitive quality of a borrower is that he gets all of the benefit. Right? The borrower gets all of the benefit, the lender doesn't get any benefit. So therefore, since the borrower is getting, the benefit, so he, because the borrower is getting the benefit, so, because the borrower is getting the benefit, so once it's over, so we said the borrowing period is over, so he's no longer chayiv like a shol, but he would at least be, he would still be responsible, he's not completely off the hook, he did get benefit from Shimon, so he would at least still be chayiv for, gneva v'aveda until, as a shomer sachar, until the cow is returned to Shimon. Tanikavosid Ameimer, Vitaka have a brisa supporting Ameimer. Halikeach kelim mibeisa umin, somebody who buys, what am I doing? So you have a future son-in-law, a guy's engaged, and he wants to send a gift to his engaged, his fiance, and he wants to make a good impression. The people should like him. So he goes to, I guess, a jeweler. And he buys jewelry from a jeweler. And he's going to send them to his fiance at his father-in-law's house. And the guy says to the jeweler, look, if they like it, if it's a success, if they like the jewelry and they want to keep them, obviously I will pay you for the jewelry. But if they don't like them and they want to return them, well then ani nosin l'cha lifitovas hanoya sheboin. Well then what I'll pay you is, I guess I don't know if they're going to return them necessarily, but I don't know if they don't like them. I don't know what you're going to do with them then. Does Asher say anything? I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. But anyways, if they don't like them, I will pay you So then what I will pay you is like, look, even if they don't like them, I still get some what's it called? Clout points. Still get points. I thought of, even if it wasn't right, it's the thought that counts, right? At least they see that I tried to do something nice. I get a few points like that. So I'll give you the value of those points. I'll give you some money because even if it doesn't work out, I still benefit from it. I'll give you money for that. Okay. So now Venensu, and then I don't know, they got some kind of ones happened. So Balicha Chayv. So if it's on the way, and he had, he made a kinyan on it, he didn't pay for it yet, but he had made a kinyan on it, he picked it up, it was on his way, he was going to be delivering it, so he's responsible for that. But on the way back, when it wasn't accepted, and he's going to bring it back to, I guess he's bringing it back to the jeweler. Well, in that point, he's patur pnei shehu kinose sacher, because at that point he'd be like a nosei. At that point, he would be like a nosei sacher. So we're saying that in that case, meaning the jeweler is kind of helping him out, and we say on the way back. So on the way there, he had made a kinyan on it, and he was going to be bringing it to his fiance. So at that point, if anything happens, he's responsible. On the way back, when it kind of missed the mark and it didn't work out, and he's bringing it the way back, so he's no longer fully responsible, but he's at least still going to be chayiv like a shomer sacher, because since he got benefit from the fact that he had this jewelry and was able to at least present it and show that he tried, so therefore, since he got that benefit, so he also won't be completely off the hook. He'll be chayiv like a shomer sacher. And here in this case, he's still going to be paying the jeweler, right? The tova sano, and still we say hol v'nene mehane. So certainly by a shoel, where the lender was not receiving anything, certainly then on the way back, even if he's not a shoel anymore, he should still be treated like a shomer sacher. Ha'u gavra tizavan lechamra lechavre. If so you have a scenario where a wine merchant was, wine monger was selling wine to somebody, and the deal was Omerle. The buyer says, "Kom amtino le leduchta ploni." I'm going to take this wine to a certain place. Im is dabno mutov. If I could sell the wine there, great. So I'll sell the wine. I'll pay you what you want. V'ilo madaina le nialich. If I can't find anybody to sell it to, I'm going to return it. Ozal v'lo is dabno. So he went and he didn't find anybody to buy the wine. Uvadidika also, and on the way back, isnis. Something happened to the wine. So also the comment of Nachman, so they came before Rav Nachman to figure out what to do. Chayive. And Rav Nachman said that the buyer is going to be responsible. Eisvei, Rav Nachman, Rav asked the question of Nachman, Nensu balicho chayiv v'chazor potter, m'pnei kishu kinose sacher. But we had said that on the way there he's chayiv, right? We had said by the son-in-law that on the way there he's chayiv, but on the way back he's potter because he's like a shomer sacher and he's going to be potter for ones. So why are you saying that this wine buyer, that this purchaser guy is going to be chayiv? He should be potter if he's on the way back, because he should be like a shomer sacher who's potter for onsin. So Amalei, so Rav Nachman says, is it really a chazar? Was he really on the way back? This guy on his way back, he's not really on his way back. It's still like he's going to do business. My time outcome svaru. It's logical. B'chazir also. Ilu, is that my time is svaru? I think it's svaru. B'chazir also. Ilu ashkach zabune milo zabna. Look, on the way back, if somebody would want to buy the wine, would he not sell it to him? So when it comes like the son-in-law, he went to bring the jewelry. They didn't like it. Okay, he's going right back to the store to bring it back. Didn't work out. By the wine, he went to sell it somewhere. It didn't work out. He's on his way back. But if somebody would approach him on his way back and say, hey, can I buy your wine? He'd say, of course you can buy my wine. So it's not really like he's on his way back per se. It's more like he's just on another leg of his journey in a certain sense. And therefore, he's still going to be chayiv if anything happens to the wine. Shmor li ve'eshmor lach shomer sacher. So the Mishnah had said that if you have Reuven and Shimon, they make a deal, you guard for me and I'll guard for you. So he's considered a shomer sacher. Okay. Ve'amai shmir bebailim hi amar papa d'amale shmor li'ayom ve'eshmor lach l'macher. Wow. Okay, so why though should he be considered a shomer sacher, michayev for gneva va'aveda? But the own right, if they're saying shmor li va'ani shmor lach, so then it's considered like, when he says, it's like considered like the deal is starting at that point. That when Shimon says to Reuven, you guard for me and I'll guard for you, so it's like Reuven is already starting to guard at that point as well, and it's like he's there, and therefore Bailam Imo, so then he should be potter. If Shimon's watching, if Reuven's watching Shimon's thing and Shimon is there, so then Reuven should be potter if Shimon's there. So apparently the way that this works with Bailav Imo, it's talking about that the owner is kind of working for the borrower. So this concept really comes up by a borrower, right? That the borrower says, right, in Bailav Imo lo yishalim, that a borrower is chayiv for everything, including ones. But there's one exception, which is that if the owner of the let's say the ox is there, so then Reuben's potter if it gets stolen or something. So that's talking about when Shimon is working for Reuven. Okay, so Reuven borrows Shimon's cow, and then Shimon is working the field with his cow. So if it gets stolen or whatever, so then or even ones, Reuven is going to be potter. So we're saying shmor li v'ani shmor lach. So the assumption is that Reuven's got this cow and Shimon's working with him with the cow. So therefore, why should he be considered a shomer sacher? He should be potter. So where are we? And we want to say, so the assumption here is that just like Bailav Imo would be potter by Shoel, he would also be potter by a shomer sacher. So why would, let's say, Reuven be chayiv like a shomer sacher? Shmir b'bailim hi, but Shimon is also there working the field. So then Reuven should be potter if it gets stolen. So my papa says, it was a different scenario. It was a different arrangement. That Reuven says, can you watch my cow today and I'll watch your cow tomorrow? So it isn't actually talking about when they were working together, and it's not a situation of Bailav Imo. They weren't working together at the same time. Tana, one of the rabbis thought, Shmor li ve'eshmor lach. Okay, in a scenario of, you guard for me and I'll guard for you, that would be a shomer sacher. Hashileni va'ashilach. Lend to me and I'll lend to you. So also, right, a shoel is generally, where all the hanoah goes to one person. But here, they're both getting hanoah, because they're both going to be able to borrow. Shmor li ve'ashilech. If you guard for me, I will lend to you. So also is a shomer sacher. Hashileni, lend to me, ve'eshmor lach, and I will then watch for you. So also he's a shomer sacher because he's getting lent something. Kulin aisu shomer sacher, zelazeh, all of them are going to be a shomer sacher. Ve'amai, but why would in the scenario of shmor li ve'eshmor lach, why would he be a shomer sacher? Shmir b'bailim hi. What about the fact that shmir b'bailim, that the owner is there, so he should be potter? So Mer Papa, it's talking about where he says, guard for me today and I'll guard for you tomorrow. Watch for me today and I'll watch for you tomorrow. So it's different days and they're not actually working together. Okay. Hanu ahaluye. There are these detergent sellers. People would sell detergent. Okay. Yeah, I think there's like a kind of complex thing, but let's see. All right, let's go back to. So Hanua Ahaluye, there were these detergent mongers, and there was a group of detergent mongers. The Chol Yoma, and then every day, have afilu chad minayu. They would elect one of them. I guess they had maybe like a Toranut. They had like each one had their turn, and one of them each day would bake bread for all of them. All right, that was the arrangement that they had. That every day one of them would bake bread for the rest. How and then one day they said to one of them, Zil Afilon, go and bake bread for us. So the assumption is that he's the one who was meant to be baking bread for the group. Okay. So Amalu, and let's call him Ruvain. So Ruvain says to the rest of the group, naturally, hey, do me a favor, and watch my garment for me. Okay. So now he's out. Okay. So he's like kind of, doing the work that he's supposed to be doing. And then he says, hey, can you watch my garment for me? And also pashuba ve'ignuv. And by the time he got back, they were irresponsible, they were negligent, and the cloak had gotten stolen. Okay, the point of saying that they were negligent is because they were shomer chinams over there. I think the point is because it was like, meaning the fact that he's baking for them wasn't necessarily considered that he's doing something special for them, because I guess it was just all part of their arrangement that they just kind of bake for each other. Okay, so they were negligent, and the cloak got stolen. Also, the time to a papa, they came before a papa chayvinu, and a papa said that they are chayav. So I'm the rabbanon the papa. So the rabbi said to a papa, "Amai pshia bebailemi." Why should they be chayav? After all, wasn't Ruvain there baking the bread? Shouldn't it be pshia bebailem? So Ichsif. So Papa was embarrassed. The Sofak Milsa, in the end, it turned out that it turned out that actually at the time that it got stolen, he wasn't actually doing their work. He was like drinking beer. Therefore, he wasn't actually doing the work for them. So therefore, it wasn't a situation of by levimo, and therefore they weren't patur. That's why they have to pay. Hanichel Mandarma. This makes sense according to Mandarma. It says pshia bebailim patur. So, well, this, right. Initially we said that Rav Papa was embarrassed because he had ruled that they would be chayiv, and they said, wait, but what about it's pshia bebailim? They should be potter. Well, that makes sense if you say, right, it makes sense that Rav Papa got embarrassed if you say that pshia, that by posheya, so if these guys were negligent, they'd be potter since Ruvain was there baking their bread for them. So because again, this concept is really by a shoyl, is really by a borrower, that by lavimo lo yishalim. And then apparently we apply it also. This had come up in the past. I thought we said that was specifically unique to shoyl, but I guess we'll learn more about it in the coming weeks. But this concept of by lavimo specifically by shoyl, we apply it, I guess, to shomer sacher as well. But we wouldn't apply it so it's a machlokes about if we apply it to posheya as well, to negligence. So if you say that yes, we apply it to negligence as well, and therefore even though they were negligent, since he was there baking the bread, they should be potter, and Rav Papa got embarrassed. It turned out in the end he was drinking beer at the time, so therefore, he wasn't actually doing their work, so therefore that's why they are going to be chayiv. But that's why Rav Papa got embarrassed. But if you say that pshia bebailim is chayav, that even though the owner is there, and even though Reuven was there baking the bread, if it was posheya, he would be chayav. Well, then then why did Rav Papa get embarrassed? I mean, he was right. They would be chayav to pay because pshia bebailim is chayav. So Ella actually, how Yom Alav Didei Hava, actually that wasn't the day that he was meant to be baking the bread. It wasn't his day to bake the bread. So rather, they asked him to bake the bread and he said, sure. And therefore they weren't actually Shomer Chinams, they were Shomer Sachars, because they were guarding the cloak and he was actually, they were getting benefit, right? They were getting benefit for guarding the cloak. He was baking bread for them. So the Yom Alav Didei Hava, that was not actually Reuven's day to bake the bread. And they said to him, look, can you bake us bread? And he says, sure, I'll bake you bread. But in exchange, I want you, I'll bake you bread as sort of payment for washing my garment. So, Ada'asa Igniv, and then by the time he got back, it simply got stolen. Not necessarily B'pshia, it was simply Gneva V'Aveda. So now we have a scenario of Shomer Sachar, and it's Gneva V'Aveda, and we have Baal of Imo, because he was there baking the bread for them. And Rav Papa said that he's chayiv, but then they said, but Baal of Imo shitaka be potter. So also Ignib, also the comment to Rav Papa chayvinu, and Rav Papa says that they're chayiv. Amulei Rabban Rav Papa, the rabbi said to Rav Papa, Hashmir b'Bailami, but he was there, he was baking bread for them. Why should they be chayiv? Should be potter ichsiv. And Rav Papa Taka got embarrassed because he said, well, okay, yeah, you Taka right. Baal of Imo lo yishalim. So the Sofig lo milsa da yishaita shichra avashasi, but in the end it turned out that he was actually drinking beer at the time and he wasn't actually doing the work, and therefore it's not a scenario of Baal of Imo, and therefore they would be chayiv. Okay. There were these two people who were, traveling together. Chad Arich b'chad Gutza, one of them was tall, one of them was short. Aricha Rochav Chamra, the tall one was riding on a donkey. Chamara was riding on a donkey. Ba'avale Sdino, and he had a linen garment that's waterproof. Gutza, the short person on the other end, Michse Sarvila, was wrapped in a woolen garment which isn't waterproof. V'kamazge B'kari, and he was pasha walking. Okay, so the tall guy was on a donkey with a waterproof garment. The short guy was walking wrapped in a woolen, non-waterproof garment. Kimoti Linahara, and when they got to a river, Shakle Lisarbele, so the short person, when they got to the river, removed his woolen, non-waterproof garment, Ve'osve Ilave Chamra, and put it on the donkey. V'shakle Lisdine De'ahu, and he took the tall person's linen garment, which I think the tall person wasn't wearing. I think he just had it on the donkey. And he covered himself in that garment. The short person covered himself in the waterproof garment that belonged to the tall person who was riding the donkey. Shatfua Maya Lisdine, and then the water washed away the waterproof garment that belonged to the tall person on the donkey. So also the comment, the Rava, they came for Rava Chayve, and Rava said that he's Chayv. Amrle Rabban Rava, the Rabbi said to Rava, Amai, why should we Chayv Sheila B'Bailim? It's Sheila B'Bailim. So meaning, again, we said that Sheila B'Bailim is when the owner is kind of working for the borrower. So basically what happened? We had this scenario. We have a tall guy riding a donkey and he's got a waterproof garment with him. We have a short guy with him who's walking and he's got a non-waterproof garment. They get to the river, and the short person with the non-waterproof garment takes off his non-waterproof garment, and then he takes it and he puts it on the donkey. So by putting it on the donkey, that means that the tall person's donkey is now working for him. He then borrows the tall person's linen garment, which is waterproof. So now he's borrowing the garment, the waterproof garment from the tall person on the donkey, and the donkey is now carrying his non-waterproof garment, so he's kind of working for the short person, and then the thing gets lost. Rava says that he's chayiv. The question is, why should he be chayiv by Levimo? The tall person who owned the linen garment was with him. So again, let's read this again from the beginning. Hanu Beitcha, there were these two people. The Abu Kamaski Baruch, they were walking on the way. Chad Arich, v'chad Gutza, one tall, one short. Aricha Rachav Chaim, v'avle Sedina. The tall person was riding the donkey, and he had a waterproof linen garment. Gutza Michse Sarvela, the short person was covered in a woolen, non-waterproof garment. V'kamaski B'kari, and he was walking. Kimatu L'naira, when they got to a river, Shakle L'sarble v'osve love chamar, and the short person took off his non-waterproof garment and put it on the donkey, so that now the donkey was carrying his garment for him. And then he took the linen garment of the tall person, and he covered himself in it when he went into the water. And then the water washed away the linen garment of the tall person. And Rava said that the short person is chayiv to pay for the linen garment. The Rabbi said to Rava, Amai, why should he be chayiv? When he borrowed it, the tall person was there working for him because his donkey was carrying the short person's woolen garment. Ichsif, Rava got embarrassed, but it actually turned out in the end, that actually the short person had taken the linen garment without asking the tall person, and had put his woolen garment on the donkey without asking. So it wasn't actually a situation of borrowing. I think it was more of a situation of stealing, and therefore it would be chayev be'onsin. What was I should say? Yeah, but anyways, I think the point is that where am I? Okay. Anyways, I think the point is that he didn't ask, and therefore he's betzim a ganef, and he's chayiv for onsen, and that's why he's chayiv. How gavra de ogre le chamora lechavre. And we've seen this before, that Shimon, I believe, rented out his donkey to Reuven. Okay, so and Shimon says to Reuven, listen, Reuven, Chazi lo tezo ba'orcha denar pakud de'ikamaya. Do not travel on the Nahar Pakud road because it's always filled with water, and it's not. I don't give you permission to ride my donkey there. Zil ba'orcha denarish. Instead, take the Narish road. Delekamaya, because there's no water there. Also, ba'orcha denar pakud. Sure enough, Reuven, the renter, took the donkey onto the Nahar Pakud expressway. Vamis chamara, and the donkey died. Ki also Omar in borcha denar pakud azli umiu lekamaya. Now Reuven comes, and of course he has to report that the donkey is dead, and he says, "Look, I'll tell you, it's true. I did take the Nahar Pakud expressway, but I'll tell you there was no water there. So the issue was not the water. There was no water there." Omar le Rava. So Rava says, you know what? Male the shaker. Iboy Omar le anaborcha denarish azli. So Rava says, you know what? We trust him, and he's off the hook. That there was no water there. He didn't necessarily right. The whole point of don't go on the Nahar Pakud expressway is because there's water. Now, if Reuven wanted to lie, he could have just said, "Look, I was on the Narish expressway," but he didn't. He admitted that he was on the Nahar Pakud expressway. He didn't lie, and therefore we could trust him that. That there's also no water, right? If he wanted to lie, he would have just said, "Yeah, I was on the Narish expressway," but he said, "No, look, I was on the Nahar Pakud expressway, but there was no water, so we trust him." Right? Again, Amalei Rave. So where am I? Yeah. So it says Rave Malei l'Shaker. Why should he? We should trust him. Why would he lie? Amalei anaborcha denarish azli. Right? If he really wanted to lie, he could have just said that he went on the Narish expressway, but he didn't. Therefore, we could trust him that there was no water there, and therefore he's off the hook. Amalei Abaye. Abaye says to Rav Malei l'Shaker b'makom edem lo aminun. We don't say the svara, the logic of Malei l'Shaker when it's b'makom edem. Kilu, everybody knows that there's always water on the Nahar Pakud expressway, and therefore right, Makum Edim, everyone can testify that there is always water on the Nar Pakut Expressway. And therefore, we want to come up with this very beautiful svara, like, well, if he really wanted to lie, he would have just said he was on the Narish Expressway, so therefore we could trust him. No, this concept doesn't work when everybody knows, everybody's essentially witness to the fact that there's always water on the Nar Pakut Expressway, and therefore the assumption is that it's very nice that he admitted that he was on the Nar Pakut Expressway, but there's always water there, and he violated the terms of the rental, and he's going to be chayiv. Okay, the Mishnah had said, Shmorli v'amar lo hanach lefanei shomer chinam. Givaldik. Getting back into like another discussion about sort of like default settings. So, if Shimon says to Reuven, can you watch this for me? And Reuven says, yeah, put it down right here. Shomer chinam, then he's a shomer chinam. Amar Rafuna, says Rafuna, Amar lo hanoch lifanecha, eino lo shomer chinam v'lo shomer sacher. If Shimon says to Reuven, hey, can you watch this? And Reuven says, put it down in front of you. Well, then Reuven's basically saying, I'm not responsible. You're responsible, not me. He's not a shomer chinam. Reuven's not a shomer chinam. He's not a shomer sacher. He's a gunish. He's nothing. Okay, so now what about by default? Okay, we said, if the Mishnah says if you say Hanuch Lefonai, so then he's a Shomer Chinam. If he says Hanuch Lefonecha, he's nothing. What if he says Hanuch? What if he says, okay, put it down? Is he saying put it down in front of me? Is he saying that, is he a Shomer Chinam? Is he a nothing? What's he saying? Where am I? Well, the Mishnah had said that Davka, if he says, Hanach lefonai, put it down before me, well then, Shomer Chinam. In that case, he would be a Shomer Chinam. Hastama, but if he just said, put it down, but he didn't say put it down in front of me, Velo Klum, he would be nothing. He has to say, put it down in front of me to be a Shomer Chinam. Otherwise, just put it down as nothing. But Adrabah fakert midamar Rav Huna, for the fact that Rav Huna says, Hanuch lifanecha hu de'eno lo shomer chinam v'lo shomer sercha. Only if he says, put it down in front of you, then he's not accepting any responsibility. Hastame shomer chinam have. But by default, if he says, put it down, then he would be a shomer chinam. So elameha lek l'mashmamina. Rather, we're not going to get anywhere with trying to be medayik from the Mishnah, from Rav Huna. It's not going to get us anywhere because we'll just get stuck in the middle. You can argue that just putting it down means that he's not accepting any responsibility. You could say that means that he's a shomer chinam. We can't learn anything from there. Lema kitanoi. Let's say though it's like a machlokas tanoim from a sugya in BavaKama. A sugya in BavaKama. We're already on daf pei alf of Masechta BavaMetzia. This is mind blowing. How we've done 81 daf of Masechta BavaMetzia. This is way more mind blowing to me than Yevamis or anything else. BavaMetzia has just been a different experience. Lema kitanoi. Say it's a machlokes tanoim. Imichnis bershus bal chotzer chayav. That if Reuven brings his fruits or his animal or his vessels, right? Say Reuven brings his animal to Shimon's chotzer, and then Shimon's animal gores Reuven's animal. So we say imichnis bershus bal chotzer chayav. If Reuven had permission to bring his animal in there, well then Shimon, who owns the chotzer, is going to be chayav. Rebbe Omer b'chulam einu chayav ad shikabel ola balabayis lishmor. Whereas Rebbe says, no, Shimon is only going to be chayiv if he accepted upon himself explicitly that he is going to be responsible. So we see that Tanakama says that by default he's accepting responsibility, and Rebbe says, he only accepts responsibility if he's explicit about it. So we would say here as well, according to Rebbe, specifically Hanach Lefonai would be a shomer chinam, but Hanach Stam would be nothing. He has to be explicit. Whereas the Tanakama would say even Hanach alone would be a shomer chinam. But mimai, it's unclear. We can't necessarily say that Tanakama and Rebbe could be applied to Hanach Stam. Dilma adkan lo ka'amir rabbanon awesome. Maybe the rabbis only say over there that by default Shimon is responsible. Ela b'chotzer debas naturehi, because a Chotzer is by default, by definition, a area that's a guarded area. And when Shimon says, sure, Reuven, you could bring your animal in here, what he's saying is, he's saying, yeah, bring your animal in. It's a safe, it's a guarded area. It'll be safe here. I'll watch it for you in here. But by the case of Hanoch, right? The case of Hanoch Stam, where he's not in somebody's chutzner, he's out in a public area. Shimon says, Reuven, can you watch this for me? He says, Hanoch, put it down. Well, what he's saying is, Anoch v'tiv, where am I? Shuka labar naturiu, Anoch v'tiv nitar loch ka'amar le. What he's saying is, put it down and you guard it. This isn't a guarded place that I'm taking responsibility for it. No, put it down and you guard it. So maybe the Rabbanan would taka say over here that Hanoch Stam is not Reuven accepting responsibility to guard it. Inami, alternatively, Adkan lo ka'amar Rebbe awesome. Or maybe you could say that by the chotzer, Rebbe says that he has to be explicit, right? That Shimon's only chayiv if he explicitly said he's going to guard it. That would only be in a chotzer, because Reuven can't just bring things into somebody else's chotzer without asking permission. Permission is simply just to be able to get in the door. You have to, right? Somebody's private chotzer, right? Reuven would have to ask permission from Shimon just to be able to bring his animal in the first place. Otherwise, he can't just bring it into somebody else's chotzer. And when Shimon says, yeah, sure, Reuven, I give you permission, he's giving permission just to bring it into his chotzer, but Shimon is saying, yeah, you could bring it to my chotzer, but you are responsible. But in this case, in Rishus Harabim, Hanoch ve'ana Mantarno ka'amarle. But here in Rishus Harabim, where anybody could put anything anywhere, so Shimon doesn't have to ask Reuven to put it down anywhere. That he already has permission. It's Rishus Harabim. So what is Reuven saying? Yeah, sure to. He's saying not yeah, sure you could put it here. Of course he could put it here. He could put it wherever he wants in Rishus Harabim. He's saying yeah, sure, I will be responsible for it. Because if Reuven is saying, yeah, leave it here and you should guard it yourself, well, what, just to put it down? Does Shimon need to ask him permission to put something down in Rishus Harabim? No, obviously what he's asking is, yeah, I know I can put it down here, but can you guard it for me? And therefore, and when Reuven says, yeah, put it down, what he's saying is, Rebbe could argue, what he's saying is, I will guard it. So even though Rebbe says he has to be explicit when Reuven's bringing it into Shimon's chotzer, but in this case, it's in a public area already, so what he's accepting is to actually guard it. Alright, Chevra, we will stop here. I think it ended up being a big daf. It might be an hour already. But, wow, we did cover a lot of really interesting stuff, like default settings for what happens when a worker is done working. Is he still considered shomer sachar? Is he considered shomer chinam? We learned that, right? We brought a comparison from Shoel, a borrower who's no longer a borrower. Right? We said that in these cases they would still, right? So the shoel would be considered like a shomer sachar. The worker would be considered like a shomer chinam. We got into a little bit of the sugya of baila of imo, that when you have, if you're borrowing something, but maybe even if also you are a shomer sachar, if the owner is there, then you're patur dafka if the owner is doing work for the borrower. Then we got into the concept of, right, shomer chinam, right? If he says, can you guard this for me? He says, leave it here. By default, is leave it here, saying leave it here and I'll guard it and I'll be a shomer chinam, or is he leave it here by stam, is he's not accepting responsibility for it? So that was some interesting stuff. And alright, I think maybe tomorrow we might finish the parak. I have to decide if we're going to finish the parak tomorrow, but very cool. Alright, that was daf Pei Aleph Masechet BavaMetzia. Open your peace out.